getting one. I'm a rhino, I'm a hornet toad. Netherlands to Borneo.
Very mysterious, very elusive animal that only a handful of people in the world have seen in the wild. I mean,
being like, Tiburon, and I look up as I have this fish upside down and I'm implanting a tag into an incision, and there's a 6-foot shark swimming directly at us, and we're just like, uh-oh, we're like,
run for that fucking vehicle.
you're seeing this like
Wild and unprotected. Planet Earth, we can't neglect it. Nature sexy. We need this place, so please respect it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Wild and Unprotected, brought to you by Cape Class. I'm your host, Ethan Leaman, and today's guest is from my backyard. I'm super excited about this. We have Nicki Boyd. She is the curator of mammals, ambassadors, and applied behavior at the San Diego Zoo. Welcome, Nicki. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been really excited for this one. We don't get an opportunity to work with zoos a lot, and for this being the first zoo that we really have on the show and capacity to have you on the show is really exciting for me. So thank you for taking the time. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate it. I love talking about what I do. You know, I've worked at the San Diego Zoo for 32 years and I love coming to work every day still. Like I was just talking with my team yesterday about how much I appreciate what we get to do. People pay to come to our work, and sometimes we take that for granted. And one of the wildlife care specialists was saying, I had this great moment where he's a brand new keeper for us, and the giraffe like licked his elbow, and he was like through a fence. And it like startled him at first, and he was like, "Oh my god, that's so cool! A giraffe just licked my elbow." So it's just some great stories. So I'm looking forward to sharing with your audience.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. And I know there's a lot of stories that can be told from the San Diego Zoo. It's world renowned for a reason. It's about 30 minutes down the road from me, and I've been many a times, and I don't think there's a time that I've gone that I ever regretted paying to walk in the doors. There's some other theme parks around this kind of area in Southern California where you have that instant regret, and the San Diego Zoo is not one, either for the zoo itself or the safari park. The safari park is so underrated in my opinion, by the way.
I know, right? Like I love the safari park. I did internships up there, and I go up there all the time. It's also another great, totally different experience.
Yeah, absolute magic up there. But I think we can kick off kind of getting to know you, and what makes you you and how you ended up working for 32 years for the San Diego Zoo. So let's start with kind of your early years and what got you into this.
Well, I was born in Florida, and I've been in San Diego since I was 8, but I spent my summers in Florida with my dad, going out on the islands on his boat and catching lizards in the palm trees outside. Just always drawn to animals. Always had lots of pets. Here in San Diego, we had 13 citizens at my house. So like 6 macaws and cockatoos. And my stepdad would catch snakes, and I would, pick up these gopher snakes and get bit and be like, crap, it just bit me. But I knew it wasn't venomous, just always doing things with animals, having dogs and cats. And my step grandfather had a horse ranch. I just remember jumping on a horse when I was like 6 years old because he said that could be my horse, theoretically. And I just jumped on him bareback, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And the horse so silly. Because I fed him so many carrots, he liked me. But just grew up always being around animals, always outside in nature. I hope to inspire kids to get out there more. I have kids, and they're not outside nearly as much as I was. But yeah, it's definitely, we want to make sure we don't lose that connection with nature that I grew up having.
Yeah, I kind of had a similar upbringing also. Grew up in Florida. I was born in theme park land in Orlando and then moved up to the Panhandle and lived on Okaloosa Island in the Fort Walton Destin area and grew up constantly in the water. And I was always outside, and living in kind of a suburban area of San Diego now, you would think that there'd be kids outside all the time. And it's not the case. And it is such a bummer. And that love and affinity for the outdoors and nature is slowly being lost. So I appreciate you wanting to make an impact kind of on that next generation and inspiring like you aim to do.
Yeah, we just built Wildlife Explorers Base Camp, which is our new children's zoo. And, the zoo is a safe place to take your family. And so part of the thought was when you're going like to hike a mountain, Mount Kilimanjaro, for instance, you go to your base camp and you start to ascend this hike that you've planned and traveled for. And we wanted like kids to be on a conservation journey. And so Wildlife Explorers Base Camp is not just for kids, because that's why we changed the name from children's. So we want kids of all ages, we like to say. Adults are obviously welcome and have fun, but we want them to come to this base camp and start to ascend their conservation journey. We got a lot of water features. So you got to put your phone away. You got to climb, you got to use both your hands. And we create a lot of these habitats where it's like a monkey see, monkey do. And we took a chance, there's rocks that you could fall and skin your knee, but you got to climb and you got to balance and you got to exercise and explore. And so it's been a huge hit. But I think that's a good part of where zoos connect people to wildlife and conservation. If you don't have a backyard or you live in the city and you live in an apartment, you can get a membership and you can come as many times as you want. Sometimes people will just come for a couple hours and they'll just let their kids get out and play in a safe space and learn along the way. So it's a lot of fun to see that. And I started in the children's zoo 32 years ago, but I've always kept part of my, finger in the children's zoo or now wildlife explorers camp. And so I've never let go of that because it's a very special place to me. So hopefully people can come and see it if they haven't already and, come explore no matter what your age.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. To me, that's what it's all about. This planet and a lot of the species that, both of us get to work with, me on a semi-regular basis, you on a very regular basis, you kind of take it for granted and it becomes a part of your everyday and you forget the magic that's behind it at a zoo when you walk in for the first time. And I'll never forget, especially in the San Diego Zoo, the black bear enclosure. That is one of the most awe-inspiring enclosures that I think is there. And I encourage people to go check out things like that because you will get inspired very quickly. And the work that you guys have done is nothing short of amazing. And there's a reason it's world renowned, right? And I'm glad that there are people like you to continue to do that work. And the fact that you've kind of stayed true to your early career roots too, and kept a thumb on pulse on what's going on with the children's work. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I was in high school. I went to school here in San Diego and I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. And my AP English teacher used to read letters from kids that were at college. And he read a letter from a guy and he kept saying, you got to go to college. You got to go to college. I don't care if your parents go out to dinner less or whatever. They have to be able to send you to college. And this guy wrote about this. It's called America's Teaching Zoo, known as Moore Park College. It's in Moore Park, California. And it's exotic animal training and management. And so my ears kind of perk up and he's reading this letter. And this guy's like, I get up at 7 days a week. I have to go take care of baboons. And at the time they had elephants there and reptiles and birds. And I was like, that's appealing to me. That's where I want to go. So I wrote to the student and he sent me an application and I got it in like a week before the deadline. And I got it. They interviewed you back in the day. And I went up to the college and the first animal I walked in, there's a lion and I'm a Leo. So I was like, this is it. This is where I want to be. I found my path. So I went to that college for 2 years and I volunteered a bunch of different places and thought I wanted to like train animals for movies. And then I volunteered, not really what I want to do. I was volunteered at the LA Zoo and the gorilla keeper, he was a salty old dog. And he was like, you shouldn't focus just on animal training. You gotta, that's not going to be around forever and you should get more experience. So it's like, okay, that's a good idea. So that college was 2 years. 2 more years, I went through veterinary technician school down here in San Diego. So I had to move back in with mom and save on rent. And because I had all this exotic animal experience, I got to do my internship at the safari park, which was awesome. 2 weeks after graduating from the vet tech program, I got hired here at the San Diego Zoo. Very lucky, straight into the animal field. I was only hired for a summer job, but man, I worked my butt off. If there's any listeners out there who want to get into the field, it's like, just do any job that they ask you to do. I was like, team player. I'm like, you need me to clean the bathrooms? I'll clean the bathrooms. You need me to help hose the grounds? I'll do that. I'll take on any job. Luckily, at the end of summer, they saw value in me and they hired me full time. So my hire date's actually September, but I technically started in the beginning of summer. But, I've had so much opportunity. I mean, where do you go from the San Diego Zoo? Like a lot of people move zoos regularly and I love San Diego too. So where do you go from San Diego? But I thought about going out to Disney's Animal Kingdom. They actually offered me a job at one point. I thought maybe I'd go back to Florida and be near my dad. But San Diego was like, would you like to take a trip to Africa? I was like, yes, I would. Thank you very much. So I knew I had like an upcoming opportunity to go to Kenya. And I was like, you've taken such good care of me. I just had this loyalty to the San Diego Zoo. And I eventually did get a bachelor's. But I just went in 4 years of just full on animal immersion. It's really what they want to see. They want to see somebody who can read behavior, who can be safe around wildlife, can pick up on the little subtlest changes because wildlife masks when they're not feeling well. And so having the behavior and the medical, just scratching the surface as a vet tech. I have mad respect for veterinarians and what they have to know, but made for a really good zookeeper back in the day, and kind of launched my career here.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you kind of hit on two pieces that I'd like to talk about a little bit more. The first one being education, and especially college education. I went through and got my master's, and I'm about 5 years removed from that at this point. And if I were to go back to my alma mater and speak to students there, I probably would get kicked out by the school. Because I would say, listen, it's in today's world, it's probably not worth it. Does it look good on your resume? Of course. There's a lot of hard work that goes into getting a degree. But at the end of the day, you hit it perfectly. Immersion is the most important thing, and being able to show your value and your passion at the same time. Fortunately, when it comes to conservation, wildlife work, there is that. There are people who are like that. And I encourage people to learn how you want to learn. Everyone is different. Immersion is one way. Academia is another way. Learn how you want to learn. Incredibly important thing that I think needs to be told. I mean, I went through it. I got my undergrad in sport business management. I worked for the Major League Baseball team in San Diego and decided after 4 seasons, hell no, I can't do this. This isn't for me. And move careers. So I want to encourage people to take that bit to heart and be okay immersing yourself and being okay doing the shit jobs, for lack of a better term. That's one thing. The second thing is, where do you go from the San Diego Zoo? Nowhere. You don't.
Well, there's a lot of amazing zoos out there, so I'm not knocking other zoos, but yeah, I mean, San Diego Zoo has a lot of resources to continually to improve areas and opportunities for growth and professional development. And they've let me be a part of this journey. So I've probably had 10 promotions into different levels along my journey. And so I've had opportunities for growth. Sometimes you do need to leave to go have growth somewhere else. Or you want to be closer to family. I was here with family, but yeah, it's world famous. I was talking to some keepers from the UK yesterday that run an international keeper exchange program. And they were like, would you host somebody? And I'm like, absolutely. And they're like, all of them. I was like, you should come out here. They're like, we're hovering over the push the ticket to the plane button right now. And they're just like, are you kidding me? San Diego Zoo? And I'm humbled because like we're another zoo. There's a lot of amazing zoos out there, and some have better facilities and habitats that I've seen. Like Henry Dorley Zoo in Omaha is one of my favorite zoos ever. And so there's different components to different zoos, but so I don't want to say like we're the best zoo in the world. We have great parts and we have great reach, and we have great opportunity and a great responsibility, for conservation. I'm glad to be a part of it, but there's a lot of amazing zoos out there, but I just love it here.
I mean, there really are. The two I can think of off the top of my head that I think I would love to work with are the Tampa Zoo, and that's a little bit of a Florida homer there in me, but I do love the Tampa Zoo. I think what they do is great. The way they handle their media, and responsibility with the media, because they've done a lot of work with Nat Geo, I think is great. And the other zoo is the Sydney Zoo. I would absolutely love to work with the Sydney Zoo. Their new Africa habitat looks
I know, I got to go back and see it.
My gosh.
So the Taronga Zoo is our sister facility in Australia. And so kind of some people create these relationships. And so I went out there and worked for like a week. You're talking about the Taronga Zoo, right?
Yep. So, I know the Sydney Zoo and the Taronga Zoo are two different things.
Are they?
So there's two facilities.
Okay.
But when I was referring to Sydney, it was Taronga. So I hope if the Sydney Zoo listens, I apologize. But I was talking about Taronga because they are amazing. But I will say that the San Diego Zoo just has some special magic about it. I don't know if it's kind of the terrain as you walk in and the level of depth to it as you're walking towards the giraffes, and you have to turn down to go down towards the bears, and then you're back up and you wrap around kind of now the middle section of the zoo where you're at Panda Ridge, and there's just so much.
And it's fun. It's only 100 acres. Like when you go to Bronx Zoo, it's like 265 acres. But we curate every inch of this place. And so it's the immersion of the trees. So the founder, Dr. Harry Wegeforth, like there were some animals left over from the Panama World Expo. And so he was like, we should start a zoo here. And so obviously they had to bring in different animals, but he brought in a lot of plants too. And so the story is like, he would be like, have seeds in his pocket, and he'd be poking holes with, I don't know, his cane or an umbrella. And he'd just be planting seeds along the way as they were like plotting out the zoo. And now the trees have just all grown in, and the horticulture, rivals the wildlife collection. It's hard to put a price on wildlife and very rare plants, but we are an accredited botanical garden as well. So I think the combination of the thoughtful horticulture and wildlife components mixed together and creates this great like immersion feeling. If you're never going to make it to the rainforest in Borneo or the savannas of Africa, you can come and have that experience at the zoo with Safari Park.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's something special. And I was actually telling my team about us getting the San Diego Zoo, and one of them brought forth the question of like, well, if we're going to include zoos on Wild and Unprotected, where do we go from there? You're kind of starting at the top. And I was like, to be honest with you, I don't know. But I think it opens a really interesting conversation on zoos and the culture and the people within zoos, because a lot of the people who are in conservation and really, I think, identify as true conservationists work within zoo programs.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of depth to that. There's a lot of stories to be told.
Well, and I just wanted to touch on one quick thing about education is, so I'm getting my master's in conservation biology right now. And, I've been here for 32 years, so you can do the math, but sometimes getting your master's or even a bachelor's is more impactful with some life experience. And so I'm all for, getting a associate's in junior college and kind of getting your foot in the door and getting some general education. But I ended up getting my bachelor's in business after I'd been working here for 7 years because I started to manage people and budgets. And so if I had got my bachelor's in business straight out of high school, I'd be like just trying to pass the classes and I wouldn't be applying my real life work. So there's something to be said about kind of taking a break, finding your passion and you can go back to school. You can make it work, like, get some work experience and then get that background and to help you elevate the career that you want. So just for anyone listening out there who's struggling with, I got to go to school, I got to get, graduate high school, I got to go straight into college, I got to get my degree, and then I got to get my job. And, sometimes I know a lot of people will take a break and go like backpacking around Europe or something, but getting a job or interning, however you can. I know sometimes it's the chicken or the egg. You got to have the degree to get the job. You got to have the job to get the money to get the degree. But I think having that life experience will benefit people as they pursue that. So if you were going to get a master's, maybe you wait a while. That's why my master's is back to biology, but it makes me more well-rounded too. So think about that too. Like what are you going to bring to the table that's going to make you different than somebody else? Like having some business knowledge and animal science, or, maybe you have the research understanding, but you also have the applicable, like hands-on experience. So,
well, we can transition back to the conservation stuff and talk about some of the species that you worked with. I know there's two in particular that we have slated to talk about today. Yeah. So let's talk about those a little bit.
All right. So, when I got hired full-time at this children's zoo, I got a string. So that's just like an area of animals. And I was super excited because I got to work with Goodfellow's tree kangaroos. I had red pandas, I had otters, I had naked mole rats. I even I had a king snake that my husband was like, you have got to get rid of some of these animals. When I met him, I had like a snake and a parrot and a tarantula and an iguana and a ferret and don't tell anyone I had a ferret in California and a cat. So I donated my snake. The tarantula passed away. I gave my iguana to one of my good friends. And so I was like, I'm not getting rid of my cat and my ferret and my parrot. I had a lot of variety. So I had scarlet macaws and a lot of different things. I fell in love with tree kangaroo and red panda and really wanted to do more with, I feel like zoos have this obligation to support conservation efforts and to learn as much as we can about these animals. And so, the red panda and tree kangaroo are right next to each other. So there's a woman who does tree kangaroo work in Papua New Guinea. And so she wanted to do like a fecal hormone study. And so I had 2 tree kangaroos. I had to feed one like bananas with some blue dye in the banana. And so then their poop would look different. So we knew which one was, which fecals we were collecting. And then with red panda, we were going to get giant pandas in. This is back, and I got hired in 1992. We were trying to get pandas back in there at the time. And because I had a medical background, I was like, I could do vaginal cytology. I can do voluntary injections. And so we have a whole research arm. So I would propose all these ideas to the researchers and like, that'd be great. If you can collect the sample voluntarily, then we could absolutely use it, dial in our research and make sure that we're looking at the cells and understanding the change. And so that really got me involved with training red panda. And I just remember getting sponsored by this wealthy donor who wanted to sponsor one person. And again, this is where hard work pays off. So I was selected to go to this Wildlife Conservation Network conference up in San Francisco. And I come out and there's this guy in this booth and it has this giant banner that says, "Save the red panda." And I was like, what can help you save the red panda. So we started talking, and, he was in San Francisco and I was in San Diego, but he had donors in LA that there were no red pandas at the LA zoo. So he's like, hey, can I have this donor come down with her kids and just meet you so they can meet a red panda and, really get connected with what they're supporting conservation wise. And that was like 20 years ago. And then I had him come give some talks for our Association of Zookeepers here in San Diego. And then he asked me if I'd want to be on his board of directors. And so we founded Red Panda Network, which has been one of my passions for the last, been incorporated for 17 years now. So again, red pandas are one of my favorite species to work with. But having that string and that variety, like I'm still what they call like the naked mole rat expert. It's kind of funny, but I have this passion for naked mole rats, and we're really good at breeding them. I ship them to zoos all over. I probably get 1 or 2 naked mole rat emails a week, like helping people. Oh, I got this lump on my mole rat, or I'm having a queen war. What do you do? Or I'm interested in a colony. Do you have an extra colony? So I love working with a variety of species, but yeah, there's a couple that really have stood out to me. I'm a cat person. I still go over the Children's Zoo, or the Wildlife Explorers Base Camp has an ocelot that's 20 years old, and I've worked with him since he was two months old. And I still take him out, and he only allows me and one other person to leash him up and take him out for programs. So I go over every week and do training sessions with them and bring him out for tours. And we do cat tours here. And so cats are one of my big passions. But now that I manage the cheetah population, like cheetahs are like just absolutely one of my passions. I'm studying them. It's my master's program. It's all about cheetah conservation. Got to go to Namibia this summer and work with the Cheetah Conservation Fund, and really just want to amplify the guest perception of what they think of zoos and cheetahs. So looking at how I set up habitat, what graphics I put out there, what the messages, what are the volunteers saying, what are my staff saying, allowing the cheetahs to go run and have this exercise run, and really trying to elevate. Like, I feel like if people come and see wildlife at the zoo and they're inspired at the zoo, they're going to be inspired to support the conservation more. And so just kind of really looking thoughtfully at cheetahs really heavily right now while I'm getting my master's, but then scaling that to a lot of different habitats.
I think that thought process is going to scale exponentially too. And it wouldn't surprise me if some habitats have to be reshaped and restructured because of it. And you hit on a really good point that people in zoos who are inspired there are more inspired to support and back actual wildlife conservation outside of zoos. Not saying the zoos aren't, but for people who are researchers in the field who live out in the sticks, essentially working on that is not talked about enough. That's, in my opinion, one of the core functions of a zoo is to be able to inspire and then move on to kind of the next team. Cheetahs in particular, I feel like they're a showstopper every single time. I mean, the moment there is, especially in San Diego, the moment there is an exercise going on, or I think it's a showing. Is that what you guys call it there? Because I've seen show times.
Yeah.
The moment you guys let the cheetahs go, my goodness, it is a packed house. And I love to see that there's thought process behind the initial interaction all the way through long-term conservation. The fact that that's even considered from the get-go, props to you, props to your team. In my opinion, that's so important. That is an incredible mindset to have. And I love it. I love everything.
Yeah, I think when I get a chance to talk to guests and I talk about how thoughtful the wildlife management process is, and usually we'll call them like a wildlife presentation or something. We're trying to elevate it so it doesn't feel circusy. We want it to feel authentic and that we're educating people. I mean, that's in every zoo's mission is education, right? And conservation. And so the cheetah run, I think you're mentioning the public one we do at the safari park. Basically, it's this huge long grass field. And then we have people go inside of what we call the human habitat, I like to say. And they're basically behind this approved mesh by risk management and USDA and everything. And so people go in and they sit down on benches. And then the cheetah's completely off leash, can do whatever it wants. It chooses to usually go chase its lure. And we don't do the one on a cable like they do at the safari park. We just have one, kind of like on the end of a stick. And each cat likes something different. One likes feathers, one's like this squirrel plush, one likes this giggly ball. And so people get to see this natural behavior. And the way we work with our wildlife now is we do outcome-based husbandry, which is basically the new word for enrichment for wildlife. but we think about what environmental cues would they focus on in the wild, and how do we mimic that as best that we can in zoos. And so we do these like workflows, and we come up with these outcomes. And then we say, well, what do we want to do? Well, we want cheetahs to be able to run. Okay, well, what's the input we need to get the cheetah to run? And then what's the consequence too? So the cheetah in the wild would be running after a gazelle, expending all this energy, and then pretty successful, but still probably like 20% of the time they're going to get a kill. So they might do one run and then they'll go back and do another run. And then at the end, we give them, while the cheetah's now exhausted, it gets its kill, and it's like eating this like leg of lamb, or, sometimes we'll do a rabbit or big rib bones tied together, and they get to see the cheetah, and the cheetah will be like hind end in the air as it would in Africa, because it's probably going to get its food stolen by a leopard or a lion or a hyena. And you can't take that out of them. They just have this instinct. And so you'll see how fast that they kind of eat their food, and then they go and lay down like they would in Africa and just rest. And it's totally their choice of what they want to do. And the guests get to ask all these questions. And so it's a really fun tour. It's very popular. And I think that it's just one example of how we focus our management of wildlife here. And then again, it's that inspiration. So then people start to learn. You can give an input, like the smell of fruit, and then you have this fruiting experience for your bears, and you put fruit all over these, we call them giraffe browse bones, but they're basically stripped acacia that the giraffe have stripped.
Okay.
And it took the bear 6 hours to forage. We have wolf ambassadors too. And yesterday we did a carcass feed. So we have a pack of 3. And so, with ambassadors, you're trying to teach them manners, and you want them to, get along with their wildlife care specialists that are training them. And so when you put a carcass in, they're wolves. And the female was teeth snarling, and this is mine. And the other boys were like, can I come in and have some? And they could she'd let them have like a little bit of a leg. And it was so cool to see this natural wolf behavior. And like, it took my team a little bit of time to get to that point. Like, they did 2 together, let them kind of see what that was going to look like, and make sure they weren't fighting too much, and nobody ever hurt each other. But man, there's so much natural behavior on. She'd tail wagging sometimes, and she'd like lure the males in. And then as soon as they tried to get near the carcass, she would chase them off. And they're like, okay, you're the boss, even though they're like way bigger than her. And so I got all this great video of her just all of them being wolfy and like just having a good old time. And they all got their fair share eventually, but they had to mind the social structure of a wolf pack dynamic. And it was just so cool for my team to get to experience it.
Mm-hmm. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about zoos' involvement and their prey and how they consume their prey later on in the show. But I want to ask the question too of tying the wolves to the cheetahs. Is there anything that you and your team, or any teams around the zoo, learn from cross-species exposure, and cross-species exposure as in the teams?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I love about this job, is always learning. Like for the ambassador areas, we have like exercise yards where the animals like share space. And if we were joking, like if the wolves go up and bury a bone, we got to kind of make sure that it's not there when we let the dog in or a cheetah in. But we're like, well, the dog will find it right away, because we have a dog cheetah pairing at the same. Mm-hmm. You have to understand behavior of so many different animals. And so, luckily, the manager of the area, she's been here for 35 years, and she has raised generations of wolves and trained lots of people. And people want to come in and hit the ground running and go, and it's like, you can't just walk right up and start working with these carnivores. You have to build a relationship. And sometimes the animals pick you. Like sometimes they really like you and they have this affinity to you. And it's like, we can watch that behavior and be like, this is really good. When I would first watch some of the young wolf training, one wolf would look at me and he'd give me a growl. And of course it hurt my feelings. And I was like, I wasn't trying to be taking care of him or walking him or anything, but I was mindful because I didn't want him to displace on the trainer. And I was like, guys didn't like me. But I started working in the back with injection training for his partners. So the vets were going to allow me to do that. And so I was able to reinforce him and then, scratch and do like secondary reinforcers, is like tactile sometimes. And then I built this relationship, and now he comes up and greets me. But, I have to know, you kind of have to know when to back off. And we talked a little bit about the antecedent behavior consequence. So, wildlife care specialists are all behaviorists too. They're zoologists. They do research, they observe behavior, they modify behavior, they encourage natural behavior. And so zookeepers are a lot more than just cleaning and feeding. They have to understand all of that science. And so depending on which species you work with, I'm always fascinated, like, But yeah, you have bird specialists, you have reptile specialists, you have carnivore specialists, hoofstock. Elephants, of course, get tons of, they're so smart. Great apes are so intelligent. So sometimes they're smarter than you. You have to be really thinking ahead. But the staff is constantly studying and learning behavior.
Yeah, I could imagine there's so many lessons that the staff has learned working with cross species that they're like, I wonder how this could apply to our animals. And especially once you build up that relationship too, over an extended amount of time, I'm sure the moment they work with another species, they're like, my group tends to do this, or this specific individual tends to do this. And maybe we could apply this to that and get a better result we're looking for. And I think that's one of the cool things, being so many species located in a central location. You're able to do that and move behavior from species to species and provide better care, better treatment, better facilities, all the above with that.
Yeah, absolutely. My job as the curator of applied behavior as well is teaching how to train animals and understand behavior. And so we'll go watch, fish training, and I'll take the whole group of people and we'll all watch, and we'll like, oh man, they reinforce the fish, and this is how they set up the antecedent for this fish to come target and to get into the sling. And everyone, it doesn't matter if you work with elephants or gorillas, you come watch fish training. You're like, that is so cool. And so we'll do field trips around the zoo, and we'll do courses and classes and talk about different concepts for operant conditioning and applied behavior. But it's fun to always be learning. And there's some great conferences out there I try to send my staff to, and they come back super excited about. One of my favorite training was an eel that they trained. It was an electric eel, and they targeted it, but they had like metal washers, because I guess the electric eel can sense the metal, and like plastic targets usually, and they can't feel that. And they trained it to target into a net. And I was like, okay, if you could train an eel to go into a net, like no training challenge seems too high for me.
I do want to circle it to the red pandas though, and talk a little bit more about red pandas, because I know as of this moment when we're recording this, I know that whole habitat is just a hot spot right now. Everyone and their brother is there right now to be able to enjoy the giant pandas. But I feel like, especially with the exposure that I've had since the giant panda habitat has reopened, the love that people are giving towards the red panda habitat is so worth it. Easily one of my favorite species that we've talked about on the show for this season. Let's talk more about them and kind of what's going on with them at the San Diego Zoo right now.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I wasn't mad when the pandas left last time, the giant pandas, because the red pandas, which is the original panda, they were discovered scientifically. I always like to give respect to indigenous people, but scientifically cataloged, discovered 50 years before giant panda. And so panda is just a word. Punya means bamboo eater. So they're in two different families, but we turned the giant panda habitat into red panda habitat. And so although we did have one get out, so, it's nice to have some better structure, and that female is now in a fully enclosed habitat over in base camp. She just had a cub last year that moved on to another zoo. So again, that thoughtful process of managing populations, and that could be a whole nother segment on SSPs, which is the Species Survival Program. But red panda conservation has been a passion of mine, and I finally got to Nepal last year. It's been a year. After being on the board of Red Panda Network for a really long time. So Nepal does the most red panda conservation. That's really a thoughtful process. And they have about 25% of the world's wild population. There are two species. So there's a Chinese red panda. It's really hard to do conservation work in China. They're a communist country. They do their own work. Yep. They'll post and publish a lot of papers, but they don't let outsiders come in. And we have some colleagues that work in there, and we're working on that relationship. And I think the giant pandas are actually really going to help with that. So I love that opportunity for giant pandas to be that kind of bridge for other species in China, for us to continue our conservation work. And we do have a great relationship with our Chinese colleagues. The conservationists over there, two Chinese colleagues that stayed for 3 months with giant pandas, they send me these great videos all the time, and they have red pandas at their place. So I was like, next year we're doing a red panda symposium. You think you have anybody who would come from China? We want to get all the range countries represented. So they're going to help me out with that. So super excited about that. But, the red panda is also like an umbrella species, like giant panda, and saving red panda in the Himalayas. We do a lot of restoration work and reforestation, and community outreach, and support the communities. Nepal relies on ecotourism. And so Red Panda Network works up in the Himalayas. And that provides the world's, like 1/5 of the world's population with clean air and clean water. So it's help. It's good for all of us. If we help save the Himalayas, we are going to reduce carbon. We're going to sequester it. We're going to, continue to help the populations over there. India's, just below the Himalayas. That the watershed off the Himalayas is huge. But there's so many people over there, they're just encroaching onto the land. And so, how do they have better sustainability with livestock farming? There's all kinds of ways that we help. We do encourage anti-poaching. So they've gone out and removed snares from the wild. A lot of conservation work that you see in most countries. It's almost like the threats tend to follow. So red panda's biggest threats are habitat degradation, human encroachment, livestock overgrazing, feral dogs, potentially spreading distemper. Red pandas are super susceptible to distemper and rabies. And so we have all these like multi-pronged approaches for red panda conservation. So we'll go over do rabies vaccination campaigns, like Wellington Zoo did that. The team in Nepal, they live there. So when I say go over, it's sometimes zoos are going over to help. We are, forest fires are a problem over there as well as we have here in California and the United States and all over the world, but do forest fire training. We do anti-poaching. We've done radio collaring where we track populations. I also just became the program leader for AZA, which is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. They're like an accrediting body that kind of elevate the, respect of a zoo or, accreditation is quite a tedious process where you have to meet these high standards. AZA wants to promote that zoos are saving animals from extinction. So they created a program called SAFE, which is the acronym for Saving Animals from Extinction. So this year, and I just had a meeting earlier today, we created the Red Panda SAFE program. And our goal is to be able to raise at least $50,000 a year for restoration work, for scientific capacity enhancement over there. For we have these canopy bridges, which you've probably seen, like bridge overpasses, roommates getting canopy bridges. Well, there's a lot of roads going in, so would red pandas benefit from a canopy bridge? So the Toronto Zoo has created a prototype. We're going to test it out at zoos and see if it can be used in Nepal to keep red pandas. At this point, they're not being hit by cars as much as they just avoid roads because they don't want to cross them. So a lot of the research that I've been pulling up through my master's program really talks about how far away they'll stay from roads. So we've got to do some trial and error and see what conservation efforts are really helping. But it's exciting and it's really taking off. Red Panda Network is getting tons of support, like monthly donors that have really, I remember when we first started, like the founder would loan, us $2,000 so that we could pay people's salaries. And, we just kept applying for grants and everything. And
I can understand that.
Now we make and spend over $1 million a year. And all these other zoos around Europe and Japan, and here we have chapters so the European Association of Zoos is EAZA. They are creating a chapter so they can increase funding for Red Panda Network. Japan has like 246 approximately red pandas at a bunch of different zoos. And so they've always been big supporters of red panda conservation. So they're going to create a chapter so they can raise money and send it straight to the conservation needs. So it's really exciting times for that species. And one of our most successful campaigns has been restoration work. It's hard. Some of the land's super degraded, so it's hard for plants to survive. But we have brought in restoration ecologists, and they're helping us figure out which species grow faster, and then they're going to shade the bamboo that's going to help support red pandas. And in the meantime, we're working with the communities like, hey, this is your forest. You help grow the nursery. You plant the trees. You protect it. Make sure nobody cuts it down. And so the community is like, this is our forest. Nobody cuts the firewood out of this forest. We don't want you, making your houses out of this forest. It's protected. So then they'll grow groves of trees that they can cut down for lumber, so they call them plantations. So it's very multi-pronged, and it's been I've learned so much, and it's been a great part of my career growth. And the zoo has been super supportive. We just gave $10,000 in October to more restoration work. So it's nice that I can champion projects here at San Diego Zoo and then funding to go help different species.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, right? Intention is great, but funding is what really makes the change. And I'm sure people are so tired of hearing that, especially, when it comes to wildlife conservation, because the message is always will be kind of the same. If we really want to do this, this is what it takes. It takes talented individuals, it takes passionate individuals, and it takes funding to be able to make all this happen. So it's really interesting to see how the two worlds of, Red Panda Network and the San Diego Zoo can collide in a positive way that takes the pressure off the messaging and more on the results of the work that's being done. I would say we don't want every organization on this type of show. And we don't want to work with every type of organization, but organizations like Red Panda Network, some of our marine partners, in specific, like the Hawaii Uncharted Research Collective, groups like that 100% are making an impact, deserve the backing that an organization like the San Diego Zoo or like universities that get involved and fund a lot of the marine research and work. I'd love to see those two things collide. And it's really cool to meet and discuss this with an individual that gets to see both sides of that coin. I think that's super rare and ultra enjoyable to be able to discuss because you give such interesting perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, we have 27 institutional partners. As soon as we created the Red Panda Safe program, all these zoos were like, we want to help you. How do we help you? And the important thing too, I think for conservation organizations, if you want to research them, is how much are they spending in country? Like, we have 2.5 employees that don't live in Nepal. All of our money that we send is paying the people in Nepal sustainable livelihoods to do this conservation work. And so that is a model that I think we've tried to really follow in San Diego, is that we want to make sure that the money's being spent in country. It doesn't go to some overhead and, bureaucracy or anything. And so doing your research and you should be able to look at any annual reports and things like that and show what's being spent in country. And then that work in Nepal, like the more we spend in country, the more grants we can get in Nepal. So governments will really monitor that. Not everyone wants to feel like they're giving it to an American company. We're not, taking it, we're sending it on to them. But I understand. It's like, why are we sending it to America when we're doing work in Nepal? It's like, yeah, let's send it straight to Nepal, try to facilitate.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about local invigoration too. And there's a project that I've been working on for Wildscape kind of in the background that I can't talk about on the show, but I'll fill you in after the show.
That's cool.
To be said about how important that truly is, especially in regards to conservation. When we built Wildscape, one of the things that we aimed to do was called community connection events. So anytime we would go film on location, we also wanted to host events that would bring the local community and the conservation together so you could meet the people behind the organization. Because I think once the locals truly get to meet the people and form bonds and connections behind there, they're more susceptible to wanting to getting involved. Yeah. So it's really cool to see that model displayed with an organization like Red Panda Network.
Yeah, I know. When I was there, people were like, you work with Red Panda Network? Like, thank you so much. We have forest guardians in all these different communities that go out and do the transects. And it's just supplemental income for some of them. Like, we just need it once a month. But they love getting trained and taking the school groups out into the forest, which they don't often get to go out and see wildlife. Even in Africa, they don't always get to go out and see the wildlife. And so a lot of conservation organizations are like bringing the community out so that they can do the tour, not just rich people going on safari. They want to connect them so that they have a vested interest in wanting to save their own, natural resources. And it's a source of pride for them as well. So it's just hardworking, gracious people in a beautiful country, that really could use that, sustainable income to be able to create an infrastructure that will support the people and give them, a good prosperity in life.
Yeah. And I think, and I might butcher this, so feel free to correct me on this. I believe the guy you were talking about earlier, the founder, had a saying about conservation and empty stomachs. Don't move conservation. Terrence Lee, who, for listeners who haven't listened to the episode before about Red Panda Network, told me about that saying, and it's kind of stuck with me, ever since, that conservation doesn't happen on an empty stomach. And it is so cool to see how that thought process drives local impact of, okay, there's sustainable income now where they can really focus on moving towards a sustainable model, which in turn moves into conservation. And I think that's something that our culture and kind of Western culture really has understood and adopted, aimed differently. I think it's aimed more intra-family, more so than outwards towards conservation. So it's really cool to see kind of that immersion and culture. I don't want to say culture shift, but culture adaptation and understanding as we move conservation more from the larger organizational role to the local impact role.
Yeah, absolutely. Think of your Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're starving and you have to go out in the forest and hunt something and that's endangered, but your kids are starving, you're going to kill that animal to feed your family, or
Sorry, bro.
If your livestock has to graze and is competing with red pandas for bamboo, it's like, sorry, my cattle has to eat because that's my livelihood. So you got to figure out what the community needs first, and then you kind of come up with strategies to meet those needs, but also bringing them along on the journey of why they need to conserve. People want to learn. They want to, have time to spend time with their family. They get older. They want to be doing backbreaking work their whole lives. So you create these fuel efficient cook stoves, for instance. You need less firewood, so now you have more time to, sew your clothes or do something else. Read a book, send your kids to school. So there's so many benefits for that One Health approach, where you're kind of looking at the community and how do you help them be prosperous, or at least have sustainable livelihoods, so that they can want to support it, where they're not just trying to survive every day.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think this is a perfect transition point too, to talk about the culture in other countries and how they view wildlife conservation. I know you and I discussed a particular zoo that had methods that were different than what I think we're used to here in the States. So let's talk about that and go over that story real quick.
Well, and it's funny too. So it's perception of different methods. So all carnivores eat meat, and so we feed cows to lions, or there's all kinds of different products, chicken, fish, and some zoos take donations of older livestock. So someone's horse or their goats. It's the same thing, just in the real package. So a lot of times they'll feed whole carcasses at other zoos. And sometimes they will let animals breed so that they have their own natural behavior. And so when they have surplus of those animals, they'll either feed them out. I went to one zoo and they had a petting zoo, and then they had Tasmanian devils right next to the petting zoo. And we were like, what? Oh, climb in, pet the goats, everything. You go next door, and there's a goat that the Tasmanian devils are eating. And you're like,
that's a juxtaposition.
Well, I guess I know where that goat came from, but the guests love it. And the Tasmanian devils were having a blast. It's the circle of life versus, I think we have a lot of waste here in the United States, right? So if someone hasn't managed, and there's probably farmers listening to this, or people who grew up on a farm, and they understand, if you've got to raise chickens, it takes time. Sometimes when I think about how much time and energy it takes, I'm surprised our meat is as cheap as it is, or our eggs are as cheap as it is. Because I'm like, you had to go collect your own eggs and take care of your chickens, and think of the time it takes that farmer or that rancher to do all that. It's amazing. It's as cheap as it is, but it's because we've learned how to mass produce it. But
economies.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I think it was refreshing to go to other countries and see the acceptance, like in Denmark, of the circle of life. And people would line up to donate their old livestock, because to euthanize it is try to bury it or dispose of that body is a very expensive process. To donate it to a zoo, you get to see a lion enjoying your old goat. And so we got to see kids, school groups, just sitting around watching a dissection, and all just fascinated, learning, listening, appreciating the adaptations that animal had. And here's a dead horse hanging behind him that somebody had donated that was being processed. And then everyone was watching it get dragged all the way over to the lion habitat, and then waiting for the lions to get released to get, this huge meal and this really natural behavior. And you hear stories about, oh, that's terrible that this dude did that. But then I'm like, we eat livestock. Animals eat livestock. I've been encouraged sometimes to, not make it look as much like the animal. Like we do often, no head, no hide, no hooves in some of our carcass eating. So it looks more like a process of meat, which is fine, but we're sometimes catering to the smaller percent. Most people really enjoy it. I've told people, if you don't want to watch this, you guys can go away. We feed whole prey a lot here. And so I'll warn people, if you don't want to watch this, I'm going to be feeding rabbits. They're, humanely euthanized, but I'm going to be feeding them to the hyena, and nobody leaves and everyone's getting close up, it's better for us to embrace and understand the circle of life and to make each animal's life as good as it can while it's alive. Nothing lives forever. We're all going to die. I just got back I went to Namibia this summer, and we got to go to a cattle rancher's ranch in Namibia. And he said some of his biggest challenges are conservationists, and they come in and they want all the farmers to go to small stock versus big, like cattle, because of the methane and everything. And he goes, look, he had huge land that he grazes his cows. So he's like, look at my land. I have all of this grass. I have the trees. I have all of this stuff. And you're telling me I'm the problem? Like he barely makes any money, but he's got grass-fed cattle, which Namibia is known for. And he says that there's cattle ranches that'll take the grass-fed cattle, put it on their ranch, and then call it grass-fed. They put it in a feedlot for who knows how long, and then they because at one point they were grass-fed, and then it drives down his prices. And so he had a lot of very strong opinions. He's an employee of Cheetah Conservation Fund, but he had a lot of opinions on hunting in Namibia and how if you own livestock and a leopard keeps coming in and killing your livestock, you're just going to kill the leopard because that's your livelihood. But if you can do a take permit, which takes a whole year for you to apply and allow someone to come in and hunt, that leopard is breeding and living, and you're protecting it, and you're accepting that he's going to take some of your livestock, or you're building better fences and you're protecting it more. But you are doing more for that leopard by letting someone come in once a year and do a hunting than you are saying that leopard has no value to the farmer, so he can kill it, because that's the law in Namibia.
One of the things I think that's really interesting is what I kind of call emotional science-based versus critical science-based. And when you're in the community and you have opportunities, like your brain kind of has to switch towards critical thinking to truly understand the why, and you get perspective. Where at first, and I think I'm guilty of this, and a lot of people, I think especially in America, are, because we are more emotionally driven, I would say at this point, than we are critical thought driven. Maybe it's not the popular form of thought, but it does provide new perspective. And I think that's super impactful to conservation as a whole, of, being able to understand, hey, especially like you think about Red Panda Network and the Forest Guardian program. This is a question I asked Terrence. And I was like, how do they feel as a community and a culture of us bringing, Western ideology and our thoughts into their country, into their land, in their local communities? And Terrence answered it so beautifully, because it's an important thought, in my opinion.
I saw this conservation talk one time on tigers, and it showed this house with a swing set in the snow and giant tiger footprints going right behind the swings. And I thought, that was my kids, and they use that swing set. I don't think I'd want a tiger in my backyard. So to get around, we have a hard time with mountain lions here, and they're not as dangerous as a tiger, You don't hear a lot of people getting killed by tigers. I know in India, in some places, that they do have attacks, but you can't just go in as a Westerner into a community in another country and try to be wagging your finger at somebody and saying, don't kill these animals. You have to engage them and understand what they're going through and help them come up with strategies it's very complicated. It's, if you've got 10 goats and you've got a leopard coming in and killing goats every night, granted, yes, it'd be great if you had the money to build a leopard-proof boma, which is what we try to teach people when we go in. We say, these are the ways that you can build better protection for your livestock from snow leopards and a variety of species. But sometimes they don't even have the money to do that. They're just living nomadically and going out and trying to survive. And so it is very important for us to kind of get out of our own way and our own head and our own beliefs and really try to understand what they're going through, it's hard because you don't live that. So it's really important, I think, to build trust and have a long-standing conservation project where you've built trust and you've learned along the way. And some of it's trial and error, and you sometimes make 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards in your efforts. But you got to be very mindful to respect their culture, their cultural beliefs, their heritage, and incorporate that in your conservation efforts.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think to tie it back into Red Panda Network, that is a flagship for that. Looking at the Forest Guardian program, I can't say enough about it. I didn't know a lot going into the episode with Terrence. I'll be honest. I did as much studying as I could, and the more I learned through that episode, and then after, just fully encapsulates your point of being able to go in long term, experience it, and then provide for the community on top of that. And I hope that there's more efforts to do that. And to me, it's really cool that the red panda is the champion for it. Of all species, you have something that is almost at the height of popularity too right now in regards to wildlife. You can't go anywhere now, it seems, without a red panda plushie somewhere. And I love it. I think it's great. I hope it doesn't encourage people to go up to wild red pandas if they were ever in Nepal and it's like, oh, plushie just like you. But
I didn't even get to see one when I was there. They're so hard to find, and they camouflage really well with the trees. I mean, I was only in the field for like 3 days, like in hiking through trying to find them. They'd seen them that morning. We missed them. But our eco trips do have like a 98% success rate in seeing them because you're immersed in that for like 2 weeks. But man, it's hard enough for us as researchers trying to do a radio collar to get a hold of one. You're not going to get to touch one, which is good in a lot of respects. You know, the Himalayas are pretty mountainous terrain and the trees are very huge. And, I kept saying, oh, is that a red panda? Is that a red panda? I joked that I felt like I saw 100 red pandas, but it was usually like mossy lichen, these cool gnarly branches. And then the fog would roll in. So then you're like, they're probably right here, but we just can't see them.
The Nicki who cried red panda.
Just even being like, in their habitat was just amazing. So I highly encourage people to go, but we are mindful. We only bring like small eco trips up there, and we try to be mindful of our carbon footprint that we're taking up there. And we don't want to disturb the forest too much, cause too much resource burden. I just went to Madagascar, and I've been talking conservation about Madagascar for years. And to go and see Madagascar and to see, the people are super nice, but they've had less than 10% of their forest left. And just flying over the country multiple times, just seeing all the rice paddies to feed the people. Like their poverty level was huge when they kind of took back their country. And, they need so much help over there. The more I travel, and my husband doesn't like to fly. So he watches everything on TV and he has all these opinions. And so I always tease him. I'm like, oh, you learn that on TV? Like, he'll try to tell me something about like Africa or Madagascar or something. And I'm like, I think I understand what's happening better than you do, but I try not to be like, I like him to be engaged, but I was like, that's what you learn on TV, right? Like you got to get out there and explore and see, like and I appreciate being able to drink water out of my tap and actually have flowing water. Like in Africa, like they have to walk miles to bring their water to them. And there's all these efforts to help the communities with these hippo rollers and try to get the water to their communities just so they can grow a little bit of a garden, And I'm like, oh, I gotta fill up my pool, giant water basin. The pool's getting a little low. I can just turn it on and fill it up.
Well, I think this is a perfect time for us to move into my favorite segment of the show, and I think our listeners' favorite segment of the show as well, the Wild Stories segment. So for those who don't know, this segment is dedicated to the absolutely wild, kooky, fun stories that happen to people who work in conservation. Researchers will tell you all the time who are out in the field that it's anyone's game out there. Anything can happen at any moment. And when you work in the field long enough or you work in the industry long enough, you have some pretty fun and interesting stories to tell. So Nicki, what do you have for us in the Wild Stories segment?
Gosh, had so many opportunities and crazy things. I was telling the story yesterday, which is kind of funny. So one of the trips I got to go to Africa, you have to really watch out for the primates. And they're, even in Nepal, the macaques were everywhere in the monkey temple. But we were in Mount Kenya, and they had told us, careful of the monkeys. They'll try to get, your food, make sure you have everything locked up. And so we had louvers on our windows. And then they had this underground bunker where you could go and be at a watering hole, just a slit, and you could see animals really cool close up. And so some of my group was down in the bunker, and I could hear this ruckus coming from down the hall. And in Africa, you're always careful. You got camera equipment or whatever. You're always locking your door. And I could hear monkeys in their room just thrashing through everything. They had so I'm running down. I'm like, Steve, the monkeys are in your room. And so they come running up from the bunker and they open the door, and there's 3 monkeys sitting with all the bags of trail mix, and there's just trail mix everywhere in the room. And the monkeys are grabbing the trail mix and they sneak out the window. And I was like, don't eat any of that. Of course, they probably wouldn't, but I was like, you got to clean that up and don't eat any of that. But, we tried to avoid the monkeys, but the monkeys are always smarter than we are sometimes. Well, we transport naked mole rats around the world and around the United States mostly, but I got the chance to take a colony of naked mole rats to Spain. And it was a lot easier before 9/11 to take naked mole rats in like, a cooler, because they don't thermoregulate very well. And so you have to be mindful of that. And so I literally would buy this like flat cooler and I would stick it under my seat and check on them about every half an hour. So I'll make sure they were not too hot, not too cold, and take them to the next park. So, after 9/11, we had to do clear containers. And then everything that gets inspected to the nth degree. So I always get pulled across. I have paperwork. I have all the boxes checked to get to this, zoo. I was going to a zoo in, it's called Faunia, and it was in Madrid, Spain. And so I have to go from San Diego to JFK, and I have to meet a broker who is with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And so they're armed, guards and everything. And my sister-in-law used to live in Spain. So she was like, I want to go with you. And I was like, okay, cool. So animal transports are never easy, but this one seemed to be extra hard. But anyway, we get to New York and they're like, oh, meet us at the Gordon Biersch Brewery or whatever. And it was like Sam Adams Brewery. It's in the airport, and we'll come over there, we'll inspect the animals, and we'll inspect all your paperwork and everything. And it's like right after 9/11, and I'm in New York. And so me and my sister-in-law are sitting at the table, and I have like the box with the naked mole rats, but they're kind of like covered in a warm towel with a hot water bottle and in a canvas bag, and I have all my paperwork. And so 4 officers walk up, all armed, everything, and they come up to our table, and me and my sister-in-law are sitting there, and I'm like, hi, and they're like, hi. And everyone around us is like, what is happening? So then I pull out all my paperwork, and they kind of look at the mole rats. Nobody can tell what they're looking at. They just have this box, right? Like, I'm pulling out this box out of this bag. This looks suspicious package. And so they come and they sign all the paperwork. I'm like, here you go. Okay. And so then they all walk away, and me and my sister-in-law we're about to start eating, and like the entire restaurant is just staring at the two of us. Like, what just happened? What are you doing? And I was like, I can't even explain it, because nobody wants to see rats in a restaurant, right? Like, so no, I can't be like, a bunch of rats in this box right here. But my trip, so then we get to Spain too. And then Spain, they didn't speak any English, and I speak a little bit of Spanish, enough to get me in or out of trouble. Sometimes I don't know what the difference will be. They were like, you have rats? Like rats from the United States? You can bring rats, and they're Spanish. And I'm like, no. Like, and I can see like through the glass, the guy from the zoo is waiting. And I'm like, tell them. And they take the rats and they take all the paperwork. And I'm just standing there, and they have like their lab coats on. And I'm like, no, they're for the zoo. Like, I was trying to explain as best I could that they're for the zoo. And it took them like 20 minutes, and they come back, and I was like, oh my gosh, please, don't mess with my rats. Like, I'm escorting them all the way here. I'm almost to the thing. And I was like, can you come in and tell them it's for Faunia, the zoo? And so finally they come back, and they bring the guy in from the zoo, and he explains what it is. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then they let me take the mole rats to the zoo. But then I go to the zoo with my sister-in-law, who knows I work at the zoo. She just wanted a trip to Spain. She paid her own way, but she's listening to me talk like for like 4 hours about naked mole rats, because as I mentioned earlier, like, I feel like I'm like a mole rat expert, but I was telling him all about like how they breed and how, they have a queen, and she's like a, queen bee or termite. And like, I was just going on and on about naked mole rat biology and how to manage them. And afterwards, like, I didn't really think it was exciting or anything. And she was like, oh my God, it's so amazing. I'd like to see you in action and how much you know. And I was like, really? Like, I was surprised that she was so impressed. And she still talks about that story. Like, remember when we took those naked mole rats? And I was like, that's just one species that I kind of know a lot about. I have to know a lot about a lot of things. But I was humbled and just the way she just was looking at me, like I was some like hero, rock star. Like, I knew so much stuff. And we got all the special treatment, all the tours at the zoo in Spain and everything. Animal transports, I probably could tell you like 10 crazy animal transport stories. Like, we took animals to the Today Show in New York one time. And so we were doing like Australia, Madagascar, and I had a FUSA ambassador. So if you don't know what a FUSA is, it's the apex predator of Madagascar. And they're a challenge, but they're fun. I loved working with them, but I was one of the only people that could work this animal. And I had to get him, and like whatever, it's Studio 67 or whatever in New York is like you think it's like, oh, this big building and everything. No, it's teeny tiny. Like you could barely fit in the elevator. The studio is super small. I had to he actually slept in my hotel room, like in a portable transport cage, which I found out I'm very allergic to sleeping in the same room with a bunch of hay. So that was not fun. But, I had this Fusa in my room, get him into the crate, take him to the studio. There's 20 people 6 feet away from the table. And they're like, I have, a segment where I have to get him visible to the camera and then safely into the crate. And he's a fanatic for eating. So I had to have the food in a Ziploc bag in my pocket so he wouldn't smell the food. And I was just praying on live TV that he didn't, attack me or attack the host or the spokesperson or the cameras and all the cords and everything. I was just all the things that could have gone wrong. And he did perfectly. He got up on the table. Everyone could see this magnificent Fusa. Nobody knows what a Fusa is most of the time. And they were on to the next animal. So I was just a bag of food, the meatball out of my pocket. I was asked him to crate. He crated, fed him. I was like the stress, you can't even sleep when you're getting something like that coming up the next day. Just making sure everything goes right and that you don't embarrass the zoo on national television. And nobody gets, eaten alive. Not really, but he's done some damage from time to time, but those kind of fun stories are, stuff that people don't realize what it takes behind the scenes to do that. We flew on a FedEx jumbo jet and we had this pallet in cargo and we were in the jump seats and on a FedEx plane, they don't take off
military style.
Yeah. They don't take off like a little commercial jet. They're like this. You're just and there's no stewardess. So they're like, here, figure out how to put your gas mask on if something happens. And all I'm picturing is that Tom Hanks movie, Castaway, where, the FedEx plane crashes because you're sitting next to that giant cargo net and the cargo net has all the boxes and your animals behind it. And you can go back there and check on them once you're up in the air. But I was just like, oh, this feels like that movie Castaway. But I've made it safe many places on a FedEx flight. So just a lot of fun, crazy examples of moving animals and, being in airports and people are like, you have baby clouded leopards? I want to see them. Or you have naked morats? The pilots are super excited to come and see the naked morats. But animal transports are some of the crazier adventures, I think.
Yeah, it's so funny that you bring that up. I just had a proposal come across to me about a beluga whale transport and helping connect an individual who's working on a proposal to move a beluga whale from Korea to Switzerland. And I was like, do you understand how difficult of a process this is? Even for animals that are a little more compact than a beluga whale,
right.
This is
don't
not an
live
easy
in
process.
Water the whole time. Yeah.
No, it is unbelievable, the complexities behind moving animals and just the legalities too. People don't think about that stuff. It is so difficult. Honestly, I can't imagine.
We have to have a full background check just to do a FedEx shipment. And then, you get your own screening. They kind of look through your suitcase or whatever. And, but you have to get there 3 hours ahead. And, you've got your animal and your food and all your paperwork and, your permits and you give a packet of medical history and the diets. And you might have to bring an extra diet to transition them onto their diets. And, you got to make sure that they're temperature regulated and that they're, you watching behavior the whole time. So it's definitely a skill set that is valued. I have people who are really good on transports and we've got new technology now. We can have cameras on the animals and really, depending on the species, we move everything. Elephants, giraffe, rhino, you name it. And we've really gotten it down to science and work with some great people who are really good at it. And then law enforcement gets excited and they might even do a police escort to make sure that you get, from LAX down here safely or at least get onto the freeway. And then you have all these contingency plans, you plan for the worst and almost always it happens that everything's the best, but you have veterinarians lined up along the way if you need to. So it's intense. I can't imagine moving a beluga or a killer whale or a dolphin, but
it's one of those things where when you get presented those ideas, the first question you ask is, are you sure?
Yeah.
And you always want what's best for the animal. And sometimes, something that can cause that stressful of behaviors, I think is something that needs to be considered. And the logistics of any marine mammal, let alone something that's on the larger side. You have 18 to 20 foot whales that you're trying to move. It's never easy.
Yeah.
And I don't get to talk about that side of things very much. So I appreciate that the wild story segment evolved into that, because that's pretty cool, because I think it's really good for TV shows. Secrets of the Zoo, I think, does a really good job of that, because you get to see the months of training that goes, ahead of that. And I think that is so brilliantly captured. One of the few times I'll actually compliment legacy media that's done. But after that, that's it. You don't really talk about, too much more from a human side of things. And that is just as stressful, if not more stressful, because of the responsibility that you have tied to it. I mean, at the end of the day, someone's responsible at the very top of making sure that the animal is transported safely. And if it's not, that's a really big story for a lot of news outlets very quick.
Yeah. Well, that's why you don't hear about it, because so much planning goes into it to do it safely and to do it well. And there's lots of regulations and requirements to have the crate a certain, type and size and everything. And but yeah, as the person who has to get the animal to get into the crate voluntarily the next day, you don't sleep much the night before. You're thinking, gotta be in, and and it's still dark, and you practice, like you said, months of practice. So you set yourself up for success as best that you can. You build resilience in the animals. You train them. You train for voluntary crating. You might come in at 5 a.m. to do crate training, just so that when you do have to do it at 5 a.m., they're used to doing it that time of day. So it's definitely a lot of planning. It's not just on accident. It's a thoughtful process, but it's how we create sustainability. And I mean, sometimes it's translocation into different countries. So there might not be enough leopards in one area, and so you need to relocate certain leopards to repopulate. And how you do that, it translates between zoos and conservation organizations. We've got certain skill sets and equipment and expertise, because we do it so much, that we can help our conservation partners and be successful and kind of talk through a scenario of how to relocate and transport animals.
Yeah. Well, I think this was a perfect use of the wild segment. So thank you for telling those stories. They're awesome. I think we're getting close to wrapping up the show. And this is easily the most important part of the show, is how do listeners get involved? How do they support you? And let them have it.
Well, you certainly heard my passions for Red Panda Network. So, redpandanetwork.org is a great resource if you're interested in just learning more. I'm always happy for people to reach out to me. I love, talking to people. If someone's really interested and wants to figure out how to support San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, you can email me at nboyd@sdzwa. Cheetah Conservation Fund is another passion of mine. Action for Cheetah Kenya is one of our conservation partners. We get to talk a ton about cheetah conservation, so you'll have to bring me back at some point, and we can delve into some other topics. Wildlife Madagascar is another conservation project that one of my dear friends who retired from San Diego Zoo and moved her whole family to Madagascar to help. She was so inspired by one of her trips that she moved there and started Wildlife Madagascar. So I'm a member of that, and definitely want to drive more support. Madagascar can really use some help too. So, find your passion, what you really want to support or get involved in. It can be time. It doesn't always have to be money. You can just educate people. You can help design a website. Depends on what your skill set is. You can help a lot of conservation projects. So I appreciate you giving me this platform to talk about our conservation work. I really think it's such an important topic, and it's great to get to share some of the stories and strategies. And thank you for what you do as well.
Yeah, well, it really, I appreciate it, but there's no thanks needed. This felt like a need. That's why I started Wildscape as an organization, and Wild and Unprotected is my baby. This is what I wish I had when I kind of started down that pathway of a way to really connect with a larger group in long form content. And this is a lot to me. So I appreciate you even taking the time, because we went through a long one today. This was really good. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the listeners enjoyed it as well, and it wasn't too long for them. But yeah, I could talk about this stuff all day. So thank you, and look forward to talking to you again in the future. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And thank you to all the listeners out there. I think that wraps up another episode of the Wild and Unprotected podcast, brought to you by Cape Class. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.